Hello, 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 everyone. It's Susie McMahon, and thanks so much for coming on and meeting with us for our virtual book club live interview tonight. I want to thank Francine Katzen for coming on live all the way from Kona, Hawaii. She's our group expert. You're used to her. And Kristen Ness, our featured author. She's coming to us from just up the coast from me. So I'm on Fripp Island, South Carolina. Kristen, where are you tonight?
I'm in Daniel Island, right in Charleston, but Daniel Island is where our house is.
Wonderful, wonderful. So welcome to the Susie L. McMahon Virtual Book Club. We're about 700 strong, and we've been going on monthly books and featured authors since 2020, and I love the community that we've grown here. But with no further ado, I just want to remind everybody that comes on live, put a little comment where you're watching from tonight. It's always helpful for us to know who's out there watching live. So many people do watch the recording afterwards as well, though. But I'm going to start with Kristen's bio.
Thank you.
Kristen Ness grew up in South Carolina and serves as a volunteer for the Island Turtle Team on the Isle of Palms. A graduate of Duke University and the University of South Carolina School of Law, she is an immigration attorney obsessed with marine biology. We have that in common. She lives near the coast in Charleston, South Carolina with her family. At Loggerheads is her first novel. And what a doozy. Thank you so much for participating in our virtual book club tonight.
Thank you so much for having me, Susie and Francine. It's always so good to see you. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. I think there's a little back history between Francine and Kristen. Francine, tell us when you first met.
I met Kristen first last December. I think it was the 3rd or the 4th at my house for a in-person book party with my friends and me.
That was
I
so
met
much fun.
her through, I think it was Kathy Bennett. Kathy asked me, I said, would you like to come to my house? And you said yes. And I said, give me a date and a time. And I got the invites out. And we had a book party right before Christmas. And my friends came and we had a really good time. And my friends loved Kristen. They want her to come back. They always ask about her. And it'd be, I love all authors, but debut authors hold a really special place in my heart because I've met some really great ones. But we first met back last year and have continued to stay in touch. And so that's a really special story. I got home from California that week on a Wednesday, and I think I hosted her on Sunday. You probably didn't even know that.
But we had so much fun. That was really a special book club. I, first of all, loved meeting you, Francine, in person, and then your neighbors and your book club members were just so welcoming, had great questions, and just really made me feel like one of the group. So it is still one of my all-time favorite book clubs.
Good, because when that next book comes out, you have to come to Richmond.
Of course.
Yeah. And it was Christmas, and we still got people to come. So that was really
I know.
Fun. I always can kind of gauge when the author stays around a lot longer than after the party and talks and communicates and all that. So it's really, really fun. But anyway,
fun.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight and talking about this fabulous book. And my first question about this book, and I'm assuming we're not giving any spoilers because they're
right.
Probably
just in case.
Just in case, yeah. But I please tell our listeners where the idea for this book came from and why you decided to write it now.
Well, the idea of the book originated with my love for marine biology, which started way back when I was little, first coming down to the beach at Isle of Palms. I'd always loved writing and loved marine science from a very young age. And when it came time to think about what I might want to write as my first novel, I thought I might try to use one of my favorite sea creatures, which is the sea turtle, in a murder mystery, suspense thriller type of story, so that I could do a lot of research of sea turtles and wrap that into one of my favorite types of genres to read, which is mystery thriller. Specifically, when I came up with the idea, I was walking on the beach with my mom in about 2005. We were out on Isle of Palms. And at that time, I had a lot of early ideas rolling around in my head about what I might want to write about. I didn't have my idea yet, though. I knew I wanted it to involve a sea creature, possibly the sea turtle, but just didn't have that kernel of an idea yet. So we were on a beach walk, and that was the first time that I saw a sea turtle track in real life on the beach. Doing some research and sort of into the idea of maybe using sea turtles. I had seen pictures of the turtle tracks, but I'd never seen a real sea turtle track. And if you read the book or if you're familiar with that, it looks like a truck drove up onto the beach. So it's pretty hard to miss it, especially the loggerhead tracks. So when I saw that, this seed of an idea popped into my head, and I thought, well, what might be going on this island if you only had a track going onto the beach, but there wasn't a turtle, there wasn't a nest, and there wasn't a track going back into the ocean. So normally the female loggerhead, when she's nesting, would come onto the beach, leaving a track going up toward the dunes. Then she would either nest or she would turn around and make what's called a false crawl, and go back to the ocean, leaving another path going back from the dunes back into the water. So I don't know where the seed of an idea came from. Maybe it's just one of those things where when you're thinking about what you might want to write about, the universe sends you messages somehow, or if you're open to it, you get ideas just by looking around and being observant. So when I saw that track, I thought, what might be going on this beach if there wasn't a turtle at the end of that track, there wasn't a nest, and there wasn't a path back into the water? And that started me down the path of what could be going on this island that would make that happen. And I knew I wanted to write fiction, not science fiction. So the sea turtles aren't flying away or turning into aliens or, morphing into ninja turtles or anything like that. So it had to be a realistic plot. But that started me on the idea. And I felt like it was very pertinent to writing right now, like making that happen in the current situation we often find ourselves in on the beaches, where there are struggles between development and environment. And with erosion, especially on barrier islands, we see a lot of that happening more and more. So I felt like I might be able to teach the reader something about sea turtles, maybe teach them a little bit about what a barrier island does and sort of what the small town life on a barrier island might be like, while also entertaining them with the plot and bringing together those environmental and development aspects to it. So it really started with the sea turtles, but then wrapping that into the mystery made it a way for me to kind of dive into the message that I wanted to send, or the theme that I wanted to explore through the mystery itself.
Fantastic. Francine, do you have a follow-up question, or would you like me to hop in?
You go ahead, hop in, and then I'll ask one after you ask the next one. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that wonderful explanation. I agree with you about the fact that we all want to do a fine line walk between the development and the marine biology, and I know exactly what you're talking about for the false crawls and the turtle tracks and all those kinds of things. So I love it when something that I'm very familiar with is in a book, and then I get to talk to the author who wrote this wonderful mystery. I think it's a unique idea. Now, you, in your acknowledgments, have a list of a lot of co-friends of ours that we have interacted with since 2020. And I just wanted to have you talk a little bit about your friendship or your mentoring experience with Mary Alice Monroe.
Well, Mary Alice Monroe, as you both know, is not only a fabulous writer, but she's just such a generous, kind person who truly does care not only about her writing and the way that she uses her writing to express her love for the environment and for certain species she writes about, but she also truly cares about helping new authors find their audience and find their readers and sort of being a mentor. The way I first met Mary Alice was really through her writing. I had I was living in Charlotte at the time. And of course, being a lover of marine biology, I came across her books and found the Beach House series that involves the sea turtle team. And I knew at that time I wanted to write something similar, but in a different genre, using mystery, suspense, thriller, but also exploring sea creatures and the ocean and my love for the ocean and the low country through that. So I was drawn to her books because they had accomplished that in the setting of women's fiction or family sagas, family drama, beach reads. So I read The Beach House, and then at that time was starting my outline for this, what became At Loggerheads. And I was living in Charlotte, so I contacted the South Carolina Aquarium as part of my research, wanting to come down here and see their sea turtle hospital that they had set up at the time, and ended up emailing with Kelly Thorvaldsen. And this was before I'd met her in person and knew her connection to the turtle teams. And she was the one who said, well, if you're going to be researching anything about sea turtles, you have to get in touch with Mary Alice Monroe. So I reached out to her by email, and we corresponded a little bit then, but I wasn't living in Charleston at the time, so we hadn't met. So when I moved down here, I was about halfway through my first draft of my manuscript, and it was 2013. And the first thing I did was join the sea turtle team because, first of all, I wanted to be on it ever since I read the Beach House series. And second of all, I thought it'd be great firsthand research for my book. And through being on the team, I got to meet Mary Alice, and occasionally we were at the same sea turtle team events, at some of the auctions that we would have at the end of our turtle team season. 2 separate times I bid on her luncheon at her house, Luncheon with Mary Alice, and I won it. So I got to go and have lunch with her twice, 2 different years. But this was before I had told her I was even writing. So she only knew me at that time as one of the turtle team members. She didn't know that I was working on a manuscript. I was just too shy to say anything to her until I had something finished, because I wanted to make sure, first of all, I actually finished the novel. And second of all, I didn't want her to ask to read it and then feel like it wasn't ready. So it wasn't until I finished my manuscript in 2018 that I let Mary Alice know. And at that time, I knew her well through the turtle team and had her email address and could easily reach out. And she knew who I was just because of the turtle team. So I let her know at that time that I was actually writing a novel, that I had been working on this for, at that time, about 9 or 10 years, and had just finished the first draft. And she was immediately supportive and interested and wanted to help and offered to read it, and offered to give me a blurb as I was going into the search for agents, and kind of helped me learn the steps along the way and what to expect, and was just always very responsive and generous with her time. And I appreciate that so much, because it truly is who she is as a person. And when you get to know her, it just feels like she does everything she can to try to help out new writers, and feels like a friend and a mentor. And I've just been really grateful for her. And even after my book came out, she was always posting about it. She interviewed me for Friends in Fiction. She came to my book launch party. She posted about my book launch party. She invited me to come to be with the debut authors at her Wild Dunes event this past January. She had a debut night that she added to the event, a Friday night event, and had me and Victoria Benton Frank and Brittany Butler as the 3 debut authors from the Charleston area. So things like that. She just continues to reach out and to be supportive, and always asks me when I see her how the writing's going. And and we've had some good talks about writing in general, and sort of where I see my writing going. And she's just been a great mentor and friend.
That's fantastic. I've found that as I'm not a writer, I am a reader, but I've done this book club since 2020, and I find that author community is extremely generous and extremely supportive of one another, so graciously as well. One of our first featured authors, Rebecca Bruff, just joined. She said she's watching tonight from Ladies Island. And hi, I just wanted to see, Francine, what your next question is, and then Kristen, did you put aside a excerpt to read?
I did.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Let's have Francine ask a question, and then we'll get ready for that after this one.
Okay,
Go
great.
for it.
You know, now I remember it was Mary Alice posting about your book. And when she was posting about it, I decided I was going to reach out to you directly because I thought if she likes this book, I'm going to like it. Anyway, because I've been trying to get Mary Alice to come to Richmond for 3 years.
Oh,
So-
we got to get her up there. She would have so much fun with
Oh,
your
golly.
group. I know she would.
She would. Y'all would. They wouldn't want y'all to leave. Trust me.
Yes.
But so, how did you come up with this title? Did you pick it out, or did you have help? And quickly about the cover, because I think the cover is stunning. Did you pick the cover out?
Thank you so much. Yeah, here's the cover with the little sea turtle hatchling and the moonlight. Okay, so first of all, the title, that was always my working title, At Loggerheads. The idiom that means in conflict or at odds. It was my working title from the start, from the time I thought of the idea at the very beginning. And luckily, my agent loved it when I was working with him on the edits, getting ready to submit to publishers. And he did say that sometimes publishers will change the title. But I was lucky that my editor at Evening Post loved the title too. So there weren't any changes or even suggested changes to it at any point along the process. And it reflects the themes very well, I think, because the reason I chose it as my title was because of some of the conflicts you see, not only between environment and development woven through the story, but also what the difference or the conflict between what you think is going on, the appearance of what's going on, and the truth of what's going on, what's actually happening. That you don't hopefully figure out until the end. So that was the title was my title from the start, and it did stay all the way through. The cover, I wanted a sea turtle on it. That was my one request. And I was able to have a lot of input in the cover because I was with a small traditional press. They didn't have an in-house art director or cover designer. So we commissioned an outside cover design company, and I was able to give them a lot of input about how I wanted the cover to look. So they asked to see covers of other books in my genre that I liked. So I sent them covers that had a lot of the moody blues and darker colors, darker themes to the cover. And then I sent them some photographs from being on the turtle team of sea turtle hatchlings, loggerhead hatchlings in the morning at sunrise on the beach, just so they had an idea of what I meant by having a turtle on the beach. And then it was actually my husband who recommended doing moonlight. I was thinking of sunrise as the cover, but the sunrise cover ideas or the pictures that I was looking at, they all seemed too light and maybe if it was a romance that would work, or maybe if it was just a straight beach read, but it didn't say murder mystery. So the moonlight ended up to be perfect because it gave it this moody blues, the darkness and the shadows. And then also it's perfect because the hatchlings, the sea turtle hatchlings, when they come out of their nest, they use the moonlight's reflection on the ocean as a guide to find their way to the ocean. So it also reflected the turtle's biology at the same time as working well for the genre. So I was able to have a lot of input, and I was happy about that. I've spoken to other authors about their experiences since then, and a lot of them who had publishers that had art directors or had cover designers in-house a lot of them were just given 3 or 4 examples. Here are the ones we're looking at. Which one do you like? And they might go with it or they might not. It wasn't necessarily up to those authors how the cover looked. So I was happy to have a lot of input and was really happy with what they came back with, which was really from the time they got all of our pieces This was what they came back with. We played with the typeface a little bit and the color of my name on the title, but otherwise that was their original design. So it was almost like something that I had in mind and didn't even know that was what I had in mind until I saw it. And they did a great job.
It's a beautiful cover. A gorgeous cover was one of the comments that we just received. So good job on all of you.
Thank you.
So you have, without spoilers, hopefully a favorite excerpt that you are going to read to us. This is one of my favorite experiences when we talk with authors.
It's actually right at the beginning, and the reason it's one of my favorite is because this book, the setting very much is another character in the book. It's set on a South Carolina barrier island. It's a fictional barrier island named Anders Isle. That's set somewhere between Charleston and Beaufort on the South Carolina coast. And this excerpt describes the island and a little bit gives you a little intro to our main character, Brooke Edens. It's in chapter 1, and it just sets the mood for the book and hopefully gives the reader an idea of how a barrier island works, a little bit about what this barrier island looks like. And I'm hoping it draws the reader into that setting and sets their imagination on fire with the idea of what Anders Isle looks like. So I'm going to just read the first, it's about a page and a little bit on the top. This is from chapter 1. Brooke Edens didn't know how to find home again until she did. Home means different things to different people. Some people take home for granted, some run from it, and still others spend their lives in search of it. For many, home is an address, the four-walled structure of a house, the people who inhabit it, and the rooms carved out inside. For others, it's a feeling evoked by a group of people or a cherished activity. And for some, like Brooke, home is a deep connection to a place, a sacred spot on the map that conjures up a sense of belonging the way the moon pulls the tides. Maybe it was the taste of her salt-kissed skin at the end of each day, or the sound of rhythmic ocean waves beating in her childhood dreams. Maybe it was the animal smell of marsh mud, or the sight of a dolphin's dorsal fin slicing through morning low tide. Whatever it was, it had long ago taken root in Brooke's deepest tissues and coalesced with her blood. So wherever she went, Anders Isle called her home. A comma-shaped barrier island framing 6 miles of the slanted South Carolina coast, Anders Isle stretched from south to north, shielding plains of salt marsh and the lip of mainland from the push and pull of the steel blue Atlantic. Wide sandy beaches rimmed the island's ocean-facing side, and a swath of maritime forest on its north end was so thick with shadows it was perfect for hiding. Stories swirled about the history of its past inhabitants, furtive Native Americans, fugitive pirates, and colonial soldiers. Brooke grew up on Anders Isle with wind-sculpted trees, sea turtles, and with Drew Young, her constant, often more than friend. She knew the island's beauty in her bones. Wild tangles of maritime forest sheltered the remote North End beach, a fragile sea turtle nesting habitat, from encroaching light and noise of residents, vacationers, and development. As kids, Brooke and Drew often dared to ride bikes into the forest, to climb through tunnels of crooked limbs, and dig for shark's teeth and fossilized shells in the gritty, time-scarred dunes. Generations of people and wildlife thrived on and returned to the island. From sunrise to moonrise, Anders Isle protected, adapted, and moved imperceptibly between ocean and sky, as a barrier island was meant to do, all at once a sentinel to stand guard amid the changing of tides, and a place to call home.
Can I just jump in here for 1 second? For some reason that made me cry when you talk about home. Those descriptions. I think, and it did when I read it the first time, which was last year. That's before my mother passed. And then, after you lose your parents, we don't have a home, I don't think. So I don't know. That's a little off topic. I'm sorry, but that just really
Well, thank you, Francine. That really means a lot. It means a lot to me to know it moved you that way.
I mean, I think all authors want their books moved some kind of way, and you know, when you have moved somebody like that, you've hit their soul. I think, you know, you've done your job. Of course,
thank you. I feel like home is a very deep theme in this novel,
Mm-hmm.
and I try to start that thread right in the beginning, and it means a lot that it moved you and made you feel that emotion about what home means to you.
Mm-hmm. And I know that it's a fictionalized island, but all three of us know, because Francine's been here as well. I mean, these Fripp Island could be exactly what you're talking about, and all the islands up there near you, and Isle of Palms and Sullivan's and things like that. I think the aspect of having these barrier islands here, I don't think many people understand how much it's protecting the regular coastline, because we see it change every single day.
Yes.
You can go out and you can just see, it's like, what's going on out there today? And there's a new sandbar, or just a new grouping of sand dunes or grasses or anything. So it's really special. Francine, you're always so sweet, and I love how you bring the feeling to our virtual book club each and every time. You are always so well. You are just a joy to have as part of this interview tonight. Do you have a follow-up question for Kristen?
I have a couple. I mean, I know we're almost out of time, but a couple.
Okay.
First of all, my first question was who was the hardest character to write in this book? And then, of course, the second part is we all want to know what you're working on next and when it's going to be out.
Okay. Yes. Thank you for both of those questions. Great question about the characters, writing the characters. I had a lot of fun coming up with all of the different characters, from the characters I would call the main characters, especially Brooke and Drew, all the way to some of the side characters. One of the hardest to write was Caldwell. And
oh yeah.
And I think it was because I was trying to make him he isn't necessarily one of the two main characters, but he has a large role through the book. You know, and he's involved with, well, you know, and you see him in conversation with, or in scenes with, I guess, our main characters, Brooke and Drew. As it turned out, I mean, I used a lot of my experience being in law school and in law firms with male attorneys. So Caldwell's an attorney working in Charlotte, and as the readers will learn pretty quickly in the first few chapters, he is Brooke's ex-fiance. So our main character is ex-fiance. So he plays a sort of background role, but at the same time, I needed for her to be her reflections on him to bring through his character, so that the reader would learn enough about him to care about him as a character and to sort of follow along how he was going to develop. And one of the things that we discussed on our panel at the Pat Conroy Festival is writing well-rounded whole characters, whether they're the main character, whether they're a side character, whether they're a protagonist, whether they're a villain, making sure that all of your characters feel real and wholly developed and not stereotyped and not one-dimensional. So I would say he was the most complicated, because he plays various roles in the story, from you know, kind of popping up in present day, to being in Brooke's memories, to then kind of reappearing in her life toward the middle of the book and playing a role in some of the things that are going on the larger, well, I don't want to cause any spoilers, but in some of the larger themes of the book. He's involved in those too. So I think he was the toughest to craft, and one of the characters that changed, I think, the most as I was writing the book.
Okay.
And then what I'm working on next. Oh, so thank you for asking about that. I am really hoping that through my novels, and I have a list of novels that I want to write. You know, this one's the first one. There might be a sequel to this. I've been thinking about it later on down the road, but through my novels, I'm really hoping that I can combine my love for storytelling with my love for the ocean and marine science and conservation. And so I'll always include some type of sea creature. It might not be as front and center in the plot as the sea turtle was in this one, but it will play a role because I'm hoping to teach the readers through murder mystery, suspense, and thriller something about a, a fascinating sea creature that maybe they've never heard of before, probably won't even believe it's real. Then maybe the readers will care, and then maybe they'll want to do what they can to conserve the ocean. Um, in my next book, it will be more of a romantic thriller. So this was a straight murder mystery. At Loggerheads has a detective in it. It has, a murder at the beginning, and then the puzzle, piecing together the puzzle through the book to figure out who did it. In my next one, it's going to be a little more of a thriller suspense than a straight mystery. So there isn't a detective. My main character is going to be an immigration attorney. So I'm going to use my background in immigration law to inform her character. And there is a love story at the same time. So that's why it's a romantic thriller. There will be a love interest that comes into her life in and out of the book. But the course of the story is following her visa work with a lab that studies a certain marine creature's toxin. So a very toxic marine creature is involved, and the reader will learn more about that creature and some of the other fascinating things it does. As she starts to do her work, her visa work for this lab, getting scientists their visas and doing her day-to-day work. As the plot unfolds, she starts to learn that the toxin might be in the wrong hands, and it might end up that she has to make a decision about whether she's going to try to figure out what's going on. She doesn't know who she can trust, and then there's something sinister happening that she might be involved in accidentally and might have to try to stop. So that's gives you an idea of a little bit of what I'm working on. I'm a little more than halfway through, still sort of in the middle, figuring out how I want to piece the story together for the reader. I have my characters for the most part, and I've put them into all sorts of situations, but I'm working on it. And I'm trying, Francine, to your point of getting it out there fast, I'm trying to finish the first messy draft by the end of this year. So by end of December, early January, get it to my agent, and then once he's looked through it and helped me edit it and get it ready for publishers, then we'll submit it to publishers. I really enjoyed my experience with the small traditional press who published this first book. There was a lot of luck and timing in the sea turtle connections for that one, but for my next one, because it's not all taking place in the Low Country, we're going to try submitting it a little more widely to publishers that have a little bit broader distribution. So we're going to go back on submission for that one.
Be patiently waiting. One more thing about the book, and then I'll move on. The name Brooke, I absolutely love that name.
Oh, thank you.
I wanted my granddaughter's name to be that. But
there's a funny story behind where that name came from. So I didn't actually know anybody named Brooke, but I was trying to think of a name that evoked water a little bit, so Brooke. But in particular, I had a little best friend who lived on my single cul-de-sac street when I lived in Cincinnati as a little girl. So I was born in South Carolina, but my mom grew up in Cincinnati. So we ended up there when I was 1.5, and then lived there until just before I started first grade. And on my street, there was a girl named Brookie. And Brooke was, her name, but I called her Brookie, and she was my best little friend. And I haven't seen her since we moved away when I was probably, 6 or 7 years old. But her name just kept coming up whenever I would think of what name I might want to give to a main character. And so Brooke became my main character. And I do really like that name too.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We have one more question from our live audience, and this is from Rebecca Bruff. She wanted to know what you're currently reading, and this is usually a question I ask, so she's taking care of it for me.
Okay,
What
good.
are you reading these days?
Okay, well, I'm usually doing several books at once. So
Mhm.
I usually have an in-print book that I'm reading, and then an audio book that I'm listening to, and
Mhm.
sometimes an ebook too, but I finished the ebook already. So the print book that I read most recently, which I absolutely adored, was All the Colors of the Dark by Chris Whitaker. So he wrote We Begin at the End. That was his first breakout novel. And then this is his latest one, All the Colors of the Dark. And it is a somewhat dark coming of age story that revolves around the two main characters, Patch and Saint. It's beautifully written, very short chapters, which surprised me. I mean, some of the chapters are only a page or a page and a half. So there are like 150 chapters, but it's really just because they're little chapters. And I was able to meet him this past week because he was here in Charleston for the Charleston Literary Festival, which was amazing. And he did such an incredible talk. He's from the UK, so he's British, and traveled all the way here to do part of his book tour, which brought him to Charleston. Fascinating stories about his background and his inspiration for writing and his writing process. So I loved seeing him and getting to meet him and have him sign my book. It was great. And then the one I'm listening to that I'm almost finished with, I have about 45 minutes left, is Louise Penny's latest, Inspector Gamache. It is The Gray Wolf, and it just came out, I think maybe a week or two ago.
Yeah, it's real new.
And she has a whole series with, I don't think I'm pronouncing his name right. I should be because I've been listening to it. Inspector Gamache. I think it is.
I was going to type that in, and then I went, no, I'll just put the title.
Yes, so Louise Penny, The Gray Wolf, and it's really good also, and it's very much a murder mystery style. So the inspector is in Quebec, Canada. There's a lot of this. Narrator is actually a French-speaking narrator, so all of the pronunciations are correct. It sounds really good, and then she embroils us in this whole story about what's happening in their province, and there's some danger, and there is an environmental thriller element to it, which I was surprised by. So that was nice to see. Being a writer in that area, in that type of sort of side genre or tangential to that genre. So that's been really good. Those two books, highly recommend them.
Fantastic. And I just wanted to circle book club, everyone that's part of a virtual book club, to something that Kristen said tonight and something that we know Jeffrey Blunt does. And Jeffrey Blunt is an author who uses literature for activism through his literature. That's his goal. And I really love what you have said about always having a little bit of environmental issues in your novel. And I just wanted to post up Rebecca's comment here. Really love the intention of helping readers learn about nature and environmental issues. Stories are so powerful that way.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Yeah, I thought that was sweet.
I completely agree. I think the power of story, you can do a lot with that, and hopefully the reader learns a little something. I like books where I learn something new. So
because we're reading it, we're enjoying the story, and it's coming through. It may speak to our soul. It may speak to, like, oh my gosh, I know I saw a tire track looking thing like that. Maybe that was a turtle crawl, whatever. It's a subtle nuance of getting your message across versus the constant noise that we're getting from all different areas. Sometimes things are too loud, and something subtle through a story is really special.
I'm hoping to make that connection so people will maybe see some of the things that they read about in the book when they go to the beach, and it will hopefully spark that curiosity or that level of caring for sea creatures and just for the beach and ocean in general.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, Kristen, I just want to thank you so much for being a participant, a featured author in my virtual book club. I hope to meet you in the future, even though I know I just missed meeting you in person last weekend. And, thanks for participating. Francine, I wanted you to do a closing comment, Kristen, and then we'll sign off for the evening.
I
Okay,
would just
thank
like
you
to
so
say
much.
thank you for joining us, Kristen. I love your book. I can't wait for your next one to come out because you have a party planned in Richmond.
That's
Thank you for your
right.
time. Yeah, I love to plan a party, but and I love what you're doing, and I really appreciate your friendship and getting to know you and staying in touch, and keep writing, get that book out, get it out in 2025. I'll be ready.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Susie. Thank you, Francine. This has been such a pleasure to join your virtual book club. Thank you for choosing my novel. Thank you for reading it. And yes, Susie, I hope we meet in person very soon. And Francine, it's always great to see you. Enjoy being with your family in Hawaii and can't wait to get back to Richmond.
Good. Sounds great.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.